Great news. We want to hear from you. We want your questions, your thoughts, all of that good stuff. And you can email us now at podcast@mancity.com.
So I've got up at the gate at Dennis to go in, and the concierge says, "Have you got a ticket?" I said, No, you can't come in if you've got a ticket. He says, "I'm a player." So that was a start. Then I go in and get the game. It's packed. So as I get the ball laid off, and I heard someone from behind me saying, "Break his effing leg." Turned out it was Tommy Dougherty. It's the Man United manager. So that was me introduction.
Welcome to Manchester.
I've only been here 3 days.
The official Manchester City podcast. Watch the full video version of this show via City Plus now.
Got Barnes outside him. Donaghy prepared though to float it in towards Tommy Booth.
Oh, and what a goal by Tueart! A most acrobatic overhead kick. A really spectacular goal.
Dennis, thank you very much for joining us on the official Manchester City podcast. With most of our guests, we start at the beginning and try and unpick how your love of football emerged when you were a young person. Do you want to talk us through how football became a part of your life?
Well, I come from Newcastle. I think everybody once they can stand up as a young child. The father throws him a ball. I mean, that was what was happening in those days. That's all. There was no television and games and all the usual social additions. Now we just had to get a ball, the cheapest on a council estate. You got a ball, and that was it. And quite often, because I was the only one in the estate that had a ball, I was the most popular kid because everybody said, "Would you come and play with us because you put the ball?" So that's how you started, and then obviously into football with the school teams. And 1955, strangely, when Newcastle last won a major trophy, I was on my dad's shoulders at St James's Park welcoming the team back.
And then you ended up at Sunderland, and which you were a Newcastle fan as a kid, ended up playing for Sunderland, ended up winning the FA Cup with Sunderland. And I just wanted to dig a little deeper on that, because Sunderland at the time are a second tier team, so the equivalent of the Championship now, and beat a very good team, Don Revie's Leeds, in the final, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that must have been... That was quite an achievement.
If you go back a little bit further, because I was how I got there, because I was playing for Newcastle schoolboys all my school days, and I was captain of my school team. Newcastle trailed me, and in those days, when you were 15, you got apprenticeship offers until you were 17, and you got pro contract offers. But unfortunately, I was a centre forward, and I was a tiny centre forward, and there's a young. In fact, it was the Wayne Rooney of the 60s, a guy called Paddy Lowry, a year younger than me, scoring goals for fun. And they upped him and played him a year higher. So, but they wanted my goal scoring. But unfortunately, we had a good right winger, so they played me on the left wing. So I was the first right-footed left winger. So,
which is something that happens a lot in football now.
So I was the first one, because everybody in those days, if you were right-footed, you played right side. If you were left-footed, you played left side. But when there, you just worked, and it was a bit of an asset to me, because where normally fullbacks, the right fullback was expecting you to drop your right shoulder and go on the outside, I would drop my left shoulder and come inside. And that's when I really made my name, because my school teacher was a friend of the Sunderland scout, and he was a Sunderland fan, and he kept on about me taking me for Sunderland. So because the uncertainty was there, so they took me on a 1-year scholarship. School contract, so I still went back to school to take some more GCSEs and travelled through to Roker Park on a Tuesday and a Thursday night, hopefully to get a game on the Saturday. But on the Tuesday, it was like a 2-hour journey from my school to town to Sunderland, then a 20-minute walk down to Roker Park for an hour and a half training, then the same way back, Tuesday and Thursday, and hopefully get a game in the juniors on the Saturday. And the big break was when I was called into the youth team, which is a year above me, which is the guys that were known, Colin Todd and Colin Suggett, and famous players who made the game in the professional world. They were a year older, but they called me in because there was an injury to the team, and I came, and I was called in to play against Manchester United in the Youth Cup at Roker Park in front of about 12 or 13,000 fans in those days, which was a big attendance. And as usual, got the ball on the left wing, came cutting on me right foot and slashed the one in the top corner. Brian Kidd played for Man United that night. Slashed one in the top corner, and I made the second one. So unfortunately, even though you couldn't have a chance of wallow in the glory, you had to go back to school on the next day. But the headlines of the journal, the local morning paper, was Tyneside youngsters, the toast of Roker.
Looking back there, obviously you're a Newcastle fan. Was it difficult to decide to play for Sunderland, or was it just a case of you just wanted to play football?
Just wanted to play football.
That's all it was.
That's all it was. I had a desire, had a little flavour, and I just believed myself. You know, that was an opportunity for me. I mean, my mum kept saying, "Get a good job, get a proper job." I didn't even for a job as a junior clerk at somewhere. That would have been great. That wouldn't have got that job. But it was the football which really stimulated me, and especially when you proved to myself that I was good enough when you're playing a year above with the team. And that team went on to win the Youth Cup that year. And I was a part of the squad. And then obviously at the end of the year, I was offered a 1-year pro contract, which was standard at those days.
So in regards to that, sometimes you hear the question, if you weren't a pro footballer, what would you have been?
Lost.
That simple.
Absolutely.
This was everything to you.
Yeah, I think the fact that we had a big family. My dad had 1 brother and 6 sisters. My mum had 1 brother and 2 sisters, and I was the oldest sort of grandchild. So I was always a leader. I was a leader in my school. I captained the football team in the winter and the cricket team in the summer. So I'd always been a bit of a leader and someone to make decisions and be a sort of a leader for whatever you want to do, make decisions as far as that was concerned.
Talk us through that cup final, because that was a big launch pad for you, and obviously it kind of was probably a big reason you ended up moving to City for your first spell at City. You kind of expected to have won the cup with that Sunderland team. It was a real shock, because in those days there was a little bit more fluidity, you know. But it still was a big shock, wasn't it, for Sunderland to win the cup that year?
Well, if you look at the records, we beat the 3 favourites. You know, unfortunately, beat Man City first. They'll beat Arsenal, and they'll beat Leeds. You know, 3 of the best teams in the country. But again, looking across at Needham, and he knows because he came through our academy, and I had responsibility for the academy when I was a board director. 7 of that team played for the country, or was on the fringe of the Sunderland team. Jimmy Montgomery was in the 1970 World Cup squad for England, go to Mexico. Dick Malone and Ian Porterfield, they called up in the Scottish international squads. Dave Watson and myself played for England. Willie Donaghy played for... Mickey Horswell transferred down here. He was in the England under-21 team. And Billy Hughes played for Scotland. So that's 7 of that team, whether internationals or on the fringe of internationals. And that was a big problem at that time. And it was a situation where I was trying to drive through when I was a director of getting as many kids through the academy into the possibility of being first-team players.
Obviously, they create a core group of players then, don't they, that can be in your dressing room for a very long period of time. I mean, obviously, Manchester United did it very well in the 90s, of course. With the class of 92. And we were talking earlier about Jim Cassell. Obviously, we're jumping a little bit forward here, but you just mentioned your involvement with the academy. You know, you helped raise money initially, and you were a close confidant of Jim Cassell. And the number of players who came through City's academy during that time was really impressive, wasn't it?
Well, he holds the record. 41 players came through the academy and played first team, got 41. A game with the first team.
I said 35. I don't know where I got 35 from, but yeah, 41. I knew it was in that sort of region.
But 19 of them were internationals in various... That's across the country, across the world.
Yeah.
What are your memories of Jim and that period?
So I think Jim started in 97.
Yeah, just a year before I came.
And I think I was potentially one of his first signings when he went from Centre of Excellence to Academy.
Is that when you were a centre forward?
Well, I turned into a centre forward, yeah. I was scouted as a defender, but I remember I came on this loose trial to play in a game the next, say, Saturday against Blackpool. I scored 5 on my debut. Signed very quickly after that, and, you know, the rest, as you say, is history. Yeah. But I remember speaking with Jim, my parents speaking with Jim, and the sort of like care that Jim had for myself and so many others through all those years at the academy. He was such an important figure because obviously strategically he was doing stuff, but as a young person you don't really acknowledge that and sense that. But so many opportunities were there for you, and I think as he said, as Dennis, Mr. Tueart has said there, 41 players coming through an academy is astonishing. It's genuinely astonishing. But you can see why every player had the opportunity. The academy, like, it's so important to me looking back because the facilities they're not like they're the best facilities in the world. It's not like the scouting system was one which went all around the world, bringing everybody in throughout. But they're so good at creating an environment where people could be as good as they could end up being, being able to play up to your potential.
Yeah, what we had, Jim had people around him. He had niche people working with who were experts in this niche, in that niche, in that niche. As Nadim said, it wasn't a global, just certain niches. We got, for someone at one time, there was the Irish was the niche, and we got 4 or 5 players from there. And then there was European. And we did bring in some, as I said, 41 some excellent players, but that was a niche. It was more focused on what we had to do, and they had a little group. And as Nadim said, the facilities that they had at the time weren't the best.
I've got to say, so being here at CFA, there've been times when I've been able to go to the academy and I see just behind the doors of the academy building, they've got the wall of all the academy graduates that have come through, and to see my name on there, it makes me feel a real sense of pride.
Yeah.
None more so than when I actually brought my kids here and they saw it. They saw their dad was part of this thing because, football changes all the time. People can be forgotten about all the time. But when you realise that you're a part of the history and the sort of history which was so important to the club at the time and still important to this day, like 41 players is astonishing.
Yeah.
And I played with so many of those guys and I can see how important they were, not just to City, but to English football. I can see how just to get the chance to be there and to play at one time. But then I also remember those years for me, and I don't know if this is the same for you, Dennis, but the years that I enjoyed the most in my career were the ones where I was with people who were the same age as me doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Because you've got so much more in common with them.
Yeah.
Say whether you're doing exams, whether you're trying to get your driver's license, whether you're playing video games, but you've got so many like-minded people around you, and the environment that you created, because it was tough at times. Whether it's Alex Gibson, it's Frankie Bunn, it's Paul Power, it's Steve Eyre, there's so many coaches who've helped you along the way, but they sort of made you into good people as well.
Yeah.
Good
but
players,
Jimmy should recruit the people for his team to create that environment.
Yeah.
And he wasn't easy. He wouldn't recruit anybody. You had to go through a certain analysis before he'd accept you into that team, because he knew the value of that team unit. It was very. And I always remember when the first induction night I used to go, and we had all the players, all the coaches there, and it was about 7 or 8 players we'd induct into every year. And a lot of the time, the parents were then. A lot of the time, it was single parents, because of coming through the various sort of growth period. And I'd stand up and I'd say, welcome them, and I'd always say, I said, these people on my table, the coaches, Jim and his assistants, were the best people to work with, and we've got to work together with you as parents and people who have got the kids when you haven't got them, to create the kind of person that you're going to be proud of. And I says because this area you're going to work in is catastrophic. The success rate is catastrophic. So therefore, but I tell you what, the one thing you will get in our environment, your son will get be a better person, be a more worldly person.
Yeah.
Even if he doesn't make the world of football.
100%.
And that rings true for your experience.
Yeah, 100%. And even there's somebody who came through the academy with me, a guy called Ian Bennett, who didn't make his way into the first team, but I still see him. We still have a bond to this day. Except looking back, it's from a long time ago. Like the Delia brothers, Nathan and Jonathan. I've just realised that this is the year where I would have known them for 30 years, which I find to be crazy. But again, those bonds, and because you were talking about discipline and so on, one of my fondest memories. So my under-17 team at the time, we were a good side, didn't really lose many games, won a ton of things, made it to Youth Cup semi-final, all this stuff. But I remember we were being coached by Alex Gibson on the field on the left as you're looking at at Platt Lane. And the 19s were on the far side being coached by Frankie Bunn. And Frankie used to say that to those 19s, you're not allowed to swear in training. And if you did, you had to do a lap in 60 seconds. The amount of times we'd be standing there on our 17s pitch and look across and he's seeing them just getting the laps in. But in the end, I understand what he's trying to go for. I understand the sort of discipline he's trying to put into those guys, because, people will swear. You can show your frustrations, but it's bigger than that. And you have to do it. This is what we're doing. This is our collective. This is who we're going to be. And again, to have those bonds with so many players across those years, whether it's someone that I played with, somebody even when I was younger. I remember, I think I must have been under 13s, 14s. And I'd be looking at the older age group, and at the time they used to have to wear like their own jumper and their own shirt and tie to come to games. I remember thinking, I can't wait to do that in a couple of years' time. And you see all the different stages, and then before you know it, you're in the first team.
When you come and see an academy set up like we've got today, you're somebody with such a long association with City. Obviously, you played for the club twice. You were director, so there's 3 periods of employment. Plus, you've been a fan since. You still come to games. When you come and see this, it's hard to quantify the journey that this football club has been on, hasn't it, during your lifetime?
Well, it's dramatic. I mean, it's just dramatic. I was just saying to Craig, I'm busy reading a book called The States of Play about how the big states are now getting involved in football, and we're featured very heavily. And it's interesting what makes it, because I was fortunate when I went to New York. The New York Cosmos were owned by Warner Communications, and Warner Communications used as a PR, because they bought Pelé, of course. They used the Warner Communications, used the Cosmos as a way of promoting Warner. So in 1978, 79, when I was in Warner, we owned the Cosmos, they were doing the same thing indirectly as we're doing now in the last 10 years, whereby you're building a global product, but also because you've got other sort of other companies in your portfolio, they're getting benefit indirectly through the promotion. So it's like a partnership, and it's a multi-partnership, and I think what we're doing now is, it's groundbreaking, and everybody else is trying to follow us now.
How did your move to City the first time come about? How did you get told? Sunderland were maybe lacking a little bit of ambition, and you're a very ambitious guy. I mean, is that kind of how it all emerged?
Well, it's quite honestly. You have in your football, you have the M factor. Money and manager. Either you're not getting paid enough money, or you fall out with a manager and you're not in the team. That's in essence, it's simple terms. And at the time, we just won the FA Cup. Sunderland beat Leeds, beat 3 of the best teams in the country. In fact, the Man City game at Roker Park, where we beat them 3-1, was voted the greatest game ever seen at Roker Park by all the fans. So we were on a journey, but you've got to have the ability to then take that journey on. Because you achieved this, you haven't got to stop, because everybody else will come and overcome you and overtake you. Because to see how you do it, they'll say, we'll do it. And then you've got to be prepared to go to the next stage, and then the next stage, which we've done here. We've not stood on our laurels. We've got to keep going. We've had 3 managers, 4 managers, but then when Pep come, that's where I want to be. And it's been a great time to watch. Because I've watched not from the stands, I've watched from behind and underneath the skin of what was happening at the club. It's been fantastic.
So when you got to City, was it a big step up for you at the time? that first time?
Well, it was obviously because I was playing in the second division, and fell out with Bob Stoker, the manager at Sunderland. There was no ambition, the word you used before, within the club. We needed to buy another 3 or 4 players for the next stage. Because I always believe when you get to the next stage of a club, you've got to buy at least 3 or 4 players who are quality and experience in the level you're going to. We didn't do anything. We bits and pieces. It wasn't good. And I could see we started off. We got a couple of injuries, which we hadn't had the cup final season. We got a couple of injuries the following season. Therefore, that squad, that team, was affected straight away, and we never bought the quality that to take place. And we started losing games. And I knew I had to move. I was 20, just turned 24, and I knew if I'd waited another year before I got back to the old first division, I'd have been 26. I couldn't wait two years. And it was just one of those things I just kept. And in those days, there was no transfer windows. There was just one. The 3rd Thursday in March was the transfer window. So that's when you had to make all the deals, before the 3rd Thursday in March. And as for transfer, then on the Saturday, Bob Stoker says, come to the office on the Sunday before the 3rd Thursday. So I turned up, and then Mickey Horswell was there as well. I thought, hi Mickey, what's happening? He said, I don't know, I've just been, because he asked for a transfer, so I've just been told to turn up. So we get in the secretary's car, and I says, where are we going? He said, I'm not telling you. Sunday morning, not telling you. Can you imagine that?
Sounds like kidnapping, to be honest, for sure.
Yeah.
Modern day football. So we drive down to, and we pulled up at Wetherby, and there was a hotel in the Wetherby Turnpike there. We walked into the lounge, and Ron Saunders, Peter Swales, Tony Book and Tony Towers. No, it's not rocket science. I think it might be Man City. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, you know, we do the deals, and then they do the deals with Tony Towers and Ron Dizzo and me, and he says, right, can you come down tomorrow? This is a Sunday. So I said, yeah, of course, yeah. So I said to Tony Book, I says, how do you get to Manchester? Never been. I never drove that far before in my life. You know, how do you get to Manchester? I had a car, but never drove that far. He says, M62, come to Leeds, 62, you'll see the signs for the stadium. Get off Stretford, turn left, end up at Old Trafford. Because I'm full of... Can't be... Had to get redirected to Maine Road and then discuss it did the final deal with Ron Saunders. See, I'm thinking about playing on Wednesday. This is on the Monday. I said, yeah, who are you playing? This is Man United. Oh, nice one. Not realise the sort of rivalry there. I said, okay. So we turned up and got a hotel. We turned up on the Wednesday, and I don't even remember. Maine Road had the gated entrance. So I've got up at the gated entrance to go in, and the concierge says, have you got a ticket? I said, no, you can't come in if you got a ticket. He says, I'm a player. No, you can't take it. So then somebody explained who I was, and it was there's a little door down below into the dressing rooms. So that was a start. Then I go in and get the game. It's packed. You know, Maine Road is packed. Great. So as I get the ball laid off, and I heard someone from behind me saying, break his effing leg. Turned out it's Tommy Dougherty. It's the Man United manager. So that's a nice introduction. And just before half time, the skirmish is going on all over as you do in derby games. And then Mike Doyle and Lou Macari get squared up and just pushing and shoveled handbags at 5 paces, you know. And Clive Thomas was a famous Welsh referee who was very fussy. And he came across, off. Lou and Doyle are just looking at you. Clive, this is normal for a derby game, because we had Mike Summer was our centre forward, Jim Holt was their centre half, and they were going like all game at each other. He says, no, off. And they just stood looking at it. So eventually he took us all off, took both teams off the pitch before half time, and he wouldn't let us come back on the pitch until Doyley and Lou Macari stayed in the dressing room. So that was my introduction to
Manchester.
I've only been here 3 days. If I get lost, I get lost. I got to Old Trafford. I get banned at the not allowed in the stadium. They got the visiting managers tell me to break my effing leg, and then we're off the pitch at half time.
Incredible. So, what was your experience of playing at Maine Road? Because obviously the Kippax was pretty iconic. You know, 18,000 or whatever it was, but unlike other iconic stands at other stadiums there at the end, this ran down the side of the pitch. Especially for a wide player. What was your experience playing
Great
there?
being a wide player.
Yeah.
Great being a wide player, because they really took it to the heart, you know. And I used to have a little thing I used to do when if it was first half on that side, I'd just start walking over towards, and I'd keep my head down, and then as I got near the touchline, I'd just look up and smile, and the place just erupted.
Yeah,
you know, because that's you engaging, and that's what you want. And I've always felt it's important to engage with the supporters. That's very important to any football club.
Incredible atmosphere at Maine Road on the big nights, wasn't
absolutely.
it?
Yeah. Well, the other one obviously was when we beat United 4-0, and until Ilkay Gundogan scored the 12-second.
It's taking your record, isn't it?
Takes my record away.
Yeah,
because my record was 35 seconds,
and it stood for a long time.
I know, 35 seconds.
Do you think anyone will beat Ilkay's, or because that is? I mean, if 35 seconds is pretty quick.
That's a disaster for United to concede as quick as Gundogan scored.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that again? Like, what's happened? Is that someone shooting from the kickoff?
Yeah.
Or you're laying your marker down there and that.
Yeah. Just in case you're not ready for this game. Bang, have that.
Did you think that record would stand forever?
Well, I think you think you got a chance.
Yeah.
Got a chance, but with modern day football, you know, they get the ball forward quickly, and at that time was just. But that's what you want. You want to score the first goal in these games, these important games, because you put the opposition on the back foot and they say, "Oh, what do we do? We've got to change our tactics. So we've got to go forward. We've got to chase the game, or we've got to sit back and play deep." So it just poses the opposition a question.
That 4-0 game against United, do you reckon that's the best game you played in a Maine Road?
Oh, without question. Because I scored 2 and we won 4-0. But after the game, we watched a bit of the highlights in the players' lounge. But then we were going out to a restaurant in town. It was a city restaurant, and maybe got there maybe 11:30. And as I walked into the door, I got a standing ovation.
Amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Because they were all City fans went to this particular restaurant in town. So again, in a short time, you're getting to realise the value of success in the city, not just in the league, but in the city with that competition against United.
Yeah, it's interesting you say you recognise the importance of a connection with fans. You know, whether you're a chairman, whether you're a player, whatever it is, the fans are just key to the overall energy of a football club, aren't they?
Well, it's quite simple. I mean, in fact, I wrote a book in 2011, and the last bit, I say there was 5 elements of that period where we turned the club around from the 3rd division and established in the Premier League and in the new stadium. That was the period from 97/98 to 2003 where we had to get the club back into the Premier League and as we entered the new stadium. And I've said there's 5 elements. So first of all, David Bernstein as chairman. He was sort of a senior figure, well thought out. Then you had John Ward and David Macon with their investment. They put about 5 or 10 million because they just sold JD Sports and they had cash and they loved the club. And John became a director and David was a sort of on the sides. They had 2 with their investment. And there was then Jim Cassell with his developing of the academy, because if we hadn't had that 60 million and 41 players coming through, of which a lot were established like Nadim and contributed so much to the club going forward without having to move. And then the 5th one I say is, when I say the fans, I said the supporters. Says what you gave us in those 5 years, I says you give us patience, you give us support, because we had a lot of things to sort out from the state the club was in. Because when we look at the club, it was a shambles. I always remember when I brought Joe Rod in and went to see him one time and he started laughing. I said, what's up? He says, I've just saw a young lad come into the see me. He said, he's got number 66 on his uniform. 66. We were carrying so many players with, obviously, and that's a cost element. And there's one particular game early on at Maine Road. And I counted behind the players who weren't involved, not even on the bench, weren't involved. And this would be 98. There was £13,000 worth of wages sat behind doing nothing. You know, so the previous policy of whatever it was shambles. And we had to then work that didn't have the patience of the supporters and the support of the supporters. That's why I created a little scheme where they could write in, fax in, a request for someone to go from the club to their monthly branch meetings. I think we had about 80 odd branches at the time, which is essential because we had to. And I said to the chairman, we just have to be relegated at Stoke. I said to the chairman, we've got to do 2 things quickly. I said, we've got to galvanise everybody, both off and on the field, talking to them and engaging with them, empower them to be part of us. That's what we needed to have. We needed their power to be with us and their patience and their support. We couldn't do it on our own.
Well, the communication with the fans prior to that period had been pretty ropey, hadn't it? And I think Chris Bird, who was somebody
I brought Chris in, you know.
He was a big part of that as well. It felt, one, we were less leaky, so there was less sort of backstabbing and stories that were getting out to the media, but also the connection between the club and the fans felt stronger as well. So you're right, even from the outside perspective, I could feel that at the time.
Well, at one of my first board meetings, I said to, because I'd met Chris on one of his PR jobs, the work he was doing, his own business, and I seen him and I said, gentlemen, I want to just talk about bringing a PR guy. And I said, because I get the feeling, exactly what you've just said, Rob, that anybody can ring a number at this club and they'll be given get the inside track, but it'll only be opinions, gossip. It won't be the truth. We have got to get there with the power, the fans to be with us, get on the bus with this journey, because we can't do it without you. Yeah. And that was important. So we had the players on board, we had the supporters on board. So that short little period of 2 or 3 years where we got back in the Premier League, that was crucial.
We were very fortunate recently to have David Bernstein as a guest on the podcast. He's also written a book very recently. We were really there, and it's about the period that you're outlining at the moment. I mean, he's another bit of an unsung hero, isn't he, in City's history? What's your experience of working with David?
He was terrific, you know. But he was nervous. he was very, very nervous. I mean, one time we signed Pala, before we signed Pala One Shop, and he said, "Oh, it's a lot of money." I says, and then I said, "Well, listen, we need it because," and then I brought a physio in, and the physio, Rob Harris, he said we needed some new handweight, some new equipment for when we moved to Carrington, and he said, "How much was that? £4,000." I said, "Oh," I says, "Chairman." I said, "We've just bought Pala One Shop for £4 million. I says, "And you're whinging for £4,000 worth of equipment to make him better, to make our play." "Okay, Dennis, I accept."
Look after the pennies and the pounds, look after themselves, or whatever the phrase is.
But
That's
we were building.
Yeah.
We were building something, something he had, and I remember it was because David's an accountant, so he was counting all the pennies. And I was wanting to see my team on the team on
Make
the pitch.
progress.
That's what I wanted to see, my team on the pitch, and sometimes you just got to push that little bit extra.
Obviously, during the Keegan period, we signed Nicholas Anelka, who was at the time. I mean, I hadn't seen a player that good in a City shirt for a very long time.
I'll tell you a story about Nicholas.
Big moment, that.
I went to watch him training, Carrington, and Kevin liked short-sided games, so there was not much time on the ball. You make him pass. And Nicholas Anelka gave Steve Howie twisted blood. It was in him, and he'd gone, and Steve just didn't see him. He was so quick. It was fabulous.
Yeah. Well, Steve Howie's often a guest on Matchday Live, which we have in the studio, so we'll ask him that next time he's here.
He'll agree.
Yeah,
he'll agree.
He was magnificent, but and we also signed Robbie Fowler at the time. He was one of the great Premier League finishers, but obviously had quite a lot of struggles. Yeah. Those two didn't really get on.
No.
Do you know the reason why? Because on paper that looks like a very, very decent.
Do you know what? I don't know.
And,
I mean, I don't divulge too much into what Kevin was doing or how he's doing. It's not for me to tell him my pass me opinions, but he's got to make decisions. And I knew it wasn't comfortable. I thought it was a possibility of a good little partnership there, because Robbie could drop into that little number 10 role because he's quick feet, and Nicholas could go the other way. They did well for a short while, but it wasn't a long-term marriage.
And the two managers, very different, Joe Royle and Kevin Keegan, but the right men at the right time, would you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What they did, they gave us what it says on the tin. They give us what we need at the time. On their tin, it said that. They give us, Kevin, same thing, give us that. And that's what we did. We needed that. We need that relationship with the fans, with the support. I mean, both Joe and Kevin were great with the supporters.
What's your memory as a fan, even? Not even just someone who was in and around. What's your memory of that period?
So we talk about the season 98-99. I was ball boy, so I was seeing some sights on the pitch. He wasn't necessarily.
You were actually contributing to that in a way.
I was. Yeah, there's a bit of action. People missing a target. Yeah, regularly getting the ball. But yeah, I was. So my sort of love for City starts after I joined the club and I was 10 years old, and from there, like, it's my first sort of like connection with identity as such, because now we're getting a chance to go to games and you're seeing Maine Road for the first time. And while I was there as a ball boy as well, unfortunately I've forgotten what the guy's name was that used to look after us, but I used to get a chance to go into, I think it's the club shop, and there were like programs from the 80s in there. I remember looking through and learning about the club from times before I was even interested in football, sometimes before I was even born. So that was building, and I remember, like, as a ball boy, being in the tunnel before games, and you could like peep your head out and you could see the players all walking through. And as Mr. Tueart was saying, like, that feeling of walking out and seeing the fan base, honestly, it's electric. That feeling of going out, the music playing, it was so good. Yeah. And even so many things you're saying, like all those changes that the club were going through, like I was kind of there because it was Joe Royle that gave me a contract at 14 to carry on until 16. But it was Kevin Keegan who gave me my debut at 17.
Yeah.
So I've got that connection with both managers. And as I look back, like, a few people would think that I made my debut under like Stuart Pearce and so on, but it was Kevin Keegan. And to me, to be trusted by him, it means a lot to me because of what he stood for and how he wanted the club to play. Even when you're talking about playing with like Anelka and Robbie Fowler, like I was there training and playing with those guys. I remember coming up from the academy one time, and it was myself and the twins, Nathan and Jonathan. And we had to take the bus from Platt Lane to get to this place and so on. It was so complicated. Got there. Then in the training session, I remember, I think it was Bernabeu and Berkovic. They were making some passes, which I hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
I thought I was in a great position. I realised very quickly that I'm not,
Yeah.
you know, and that quality to be there. And even when we moved to Carrington initially, I remember playing one of the first games there because there was like a sports hall inside and there was just like a few like coat racks and stuff. We training there, or getting changed there to go and like play in a derby game. So I was there to see the transitions, there to be playing at Platt Lane, to see the team in there, to be able to go to Wembley in '99 as a fan of the football club, whilst also playing for it. And then within, say, 2-3 years of that, I'm like training with the first team, I'm training with reserves. Yeah. But I loved Kevin Keegan, and it's for so many little things. Not least of all, there was a point we were playing in pre-season, and I remember this clear as day. I was in defence, and the ball got played down the channel, and I was running down to. I got there just before the attacker, and I passed it out for a throw-in. And played the game, finished that, and after the game he pulled me to the side and said, listen, I think you're a good player, and a good player there would pass the ball back to the goalkeeper. We want to keep the ball. And instead of having this idea of like, you know, just play percentages, just play it safe.
Safety first, yeah.
He said, this is how I want you to play. And he's somebody that wanted you to be a better player. Yeah. And to hear that from him, something that, like, as I say, to this day still sticks with me. This is over 20 years ago.
Shifted your evolution a little bit.
100%,
So, I mean...
Well, it's about talk about Ali Bernabeu because there's a story about with Paolo. We played Sheffield Wednesday away, and I think we won 4-2 or 6-2. I can't recall.
I think we hit him for 6. Yeah.
But Paolo got 2. I think Paolo got 2 or 3, and Ali got 1 or 2. And Paolo's quote after the match, he says, talk about Ali Bernabeu. He says, Ali Bernabeu sees me before I see myself.
Yeah, that's a fact. I believe that.
His vision. He was
unbelievable.
Unbelievable player. I mean, with Kevin, because I love Kevin as well as a City fan. We want to get him in. He said no when I called him the first time, but if you're still in touch with him, Dennis, maybe you can give him a call.
I see him occasionally because he's so busy. I mean, I've seen him. He's only after dinner speaking circuits, what he does now.
Yeah, I mean, but as a fan's perspective, he kind of energised the football club, which I think you knew that when you brought him in. You knew that he would come in, energise the place, bring a level of player we hadn't had before, but would probably burn out quite quickly. Is that a fair assessment of Kevin?
When we had, first of all, we got relegated at Ipswich. We were relegated by 8 points. Coming back...
Which was under Joe Royals.
Yeah, and I had a bit of a pain in my stomach. And so I went to see the doctor the next day. He says, you want appendicitis? I says, we've got a board meeting coming. I says, no, you're in. So I was rushed into hospital the next day. Appendix out. Then they had the board meeting. David Bernstein rang me in my hospital bed after the operation. I said, how'd it go? Because I was thinking about players, and I was thinking about, because we were thinking about changing. Joe, we think he struggled because we were relegated by 8 points. It wasn't just a close relegation; it was and we needed to change it. So I'm thinking, because we didn't have any cash, I was thinking, and had the M factor. There was David Moyes at Preston, there was Mexon at West Brom, there was McLeish up in Scotland, and there's McCarthy with the Irish team, all M. So I'm getting my head around this and how do we sort this one? And David brings me, he says, good board meeting. He says, Kevin Keegan's name's been mentioned. I says, wow. I says, well, if we've now got some resources to interest Kevin, absolutely. What I call my M, but he's not Mexon, Moyes, McLeish or McCarthy. He's motivation.
Yeah.
He's Mr. Motivation. But I always remember walking across from the car park at Platt Lane for his press conference because he came to my house and stayed overnight. Walking to the press conference, and I get a call from 2 people, one from the guy I played with, who played for England, and another journalist from the northeast, and both of them were saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Kevin, the toys will come out in the pram. He always wants his own way." I says, "Listen," I says, "all I want Kevin to give me is 2 to 3 years. Get us back to where we come, and then we'll we'll discuss any problems after that. But let him do the short-termism and see where that takes us."
And crucially, you wanted someone to get us to the new stadium with Premier League football.
Correct.
Combining those two things, and Kevin obviously he did that, and he did it superbly, didn't he? So he 100% served his purpose, didn't he?
What it says on the tin. He did exactly what, and that's what you need, because nowadays the evolution of teams and squads nowadays is like 18 months, you're turning players over, all the time. So you need to have that certain mentality to be able to adjust with the change. I keep saying to my kids, you've got to manage the change.
And the promotion year leading into coming into the new stadium, so his first season, Kevin's, is one of, City fans look back on that. It's one of their favourite seasons. I mean, we scored so many goals. We had Berkovic and Bernabia playing in the same team, which was crazy. Yeah. 2 number 10s, effectively. It's not very often you see a team do that. It was just, great times.
It was a combination because we had a lot of youngsters come out. Sean Phillips came and got established himself in the team then as well, So there was a combination of, your quality, your money you've paid for these star players, but then you've got the kids coming through as well who will support that. And that was the combination which ideally you're looking for any football club nowadays. You want your investment on the real star players, but you mean to have the core. As Nathan was one of the core, and he went on to be even better. So that's what you're looking for all the time.
Football's a funny business because I reckon if you were experiencing what you're experiencing in any other industry, you probably would have walked away. But football is just this emotional thing, isn't it, that keeps you drawn in sometimes.
Well, not only that, I had my own business on the outside, I mean, in fairness, with due respect, my business turnover dropped because I spent so much time.
Most of your energy must have been in.
Well, a perfect example, when I was in the office, I've got my office in Lim, bought some property in Lim and put my office is there, and I left home at 5 o'clock. I left the office 5 o'clock, went home for a cup of tea and a sandwich, jumped on the M6 at 6 o'clock, drove down to MK Dunn's supporters branch, got there about 8:30 because the M6 is a car park about that time. Did an hour and a half with them, Q&A, signing autographs, asked questions, and left at 10 o'clock and got home at 12. But that's what you had to do in those days. You had to engage, and you can't let the supporters down. One of the board of directors, who not my favourite board of directors, said he would come, and then rang me at 4 o'clock and said, "I can't, I've got some work on."
Yeah.
Say no more.
Going back to your playing days, that team you're involved in that won the League Cup, the City team, it's one of the great City teams of all time, isn't it? When you look at some of the names you played with, who were the best players that you played with in a City shirt?
At City,
yeah,
probably Colin Bell, Ace of Hartford, and Dave Watson, and that's probably the spine.
Brilliant team,
But Colin unfortunately got injured in that Man United game, and that was the sad thing about we never. I mean, you couldn't replace Colin Bell, but we never really got anywhere near to that element. In fact, in '77 we finished second in the league, didn't we? Just to Liverpool.
Just behind Liverpool. Although Liverpool were probably far superior, but we were winning trophies and coming close to winning the league. Just for our younger listeners to talk about Colin for a second. If they didn't, have the luxury of seeing him, how would you describe him as a player? Would you compare him to a modern player, or how would you sort of sum up how brilliant he was?
Brian Robson was the nearest from Man United, but I've not seen many who are box to box the way he could do it. He was a one-off, and it was great for me because if I was on the right side, because I was a free runner, so I could go and leave that space. If the space, Colin would be flying up on the right side into that hole, and he got a couple of goals going into that space that had been left, and because his capacity for running was just phenomenal. But he always kept things simple, never overcomplicated, Colin. But he did the simple things, so he made the difficult things look simple. And with his athleticism as well was just phenomenal, and also was brilliant in the air. You could throw balls to the far post, 9 times out of 10 he'd get them.
What about head tennis? Seems to be. I'm looking at loads of old photos of City down the years, and particularly sort of Tony Buck's period, because obviously Tony sadly passed recently, and we were going through some of this, and there's a lot of images of players playing head tennis at City. Was that a long-standing tradition? Yeah,
absolutely, very competitive as well.
Yeah,
underneath the stands. We had went down the tunnel. One side was the head tennis gym, and one side was the weights gym. So I was very competitive head tennis, and it was good for us because it was good for touch and for balance, touch and balance because of a tight area.
Yeah, your
How to
footwork's
move
got to be
around,
good, hasn't it?
and your touch.
I mean, they still do it today, don't they? Because we've got these sort of
The curve table,
purposely built for it, aren't they?
Yeah,
the modern day.
Oh,
So
this
it's-
wasn't
That's
good.
the, yeah, that's
no,
the first one.
you were playing with nuts and crannies,
Because-
but the principle's the same.
100%.
presumably,
Yeah. It reminds me actually from when I was in the academy, we used to play head tennis there at Platt Lane. Frankie Bone was 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Could not beat him. Dominant. If you put him
Right,
by the net,
okay.
dominant.
Yeah.
Honestly, such a throwback. And sorry, just to mention as well, the spine that you mentioned from that City side, Asa Hartfield was my reserve team manager, and I forget that sometimes. But again, someone that was like so nice, so tough, but so important to the development of players through that time.
But I
Asa
tell you
was
what,
an incredible coach for us.
He'd kill on the pitch as well, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, he was an animal on the pitch, and you wouldn't think so, but he was a competitor. And that's what he needed.
absolutely.
That's what he needed. But when the ball needed to be played, he could play.
I've got a few friends who are older than I am, and Asa is like, for them, is a bit of a god. Yeah, it's always been passed on to me that he is, a bit of a City icon. In terms of managers, then Tony Buck, John Bond, who's the best? Who's the best you played under at City?
It's difficult to say because I like Malcolm when I first came.
Yeah,
I had to convince Malcolm because when I came back from New York, contact Peter Swales. Are you interested? Yeah, of course. I said, well, I need to speak to Malcolm Allison. I says, because I was 30, just turned 30. I said, if I'm coming back, I need to have a relationship with the coach. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. He needs to understand why I'm coming back, and I'm not just come back for a little swan song. I'm still competitive, still want to win things. And he says, okay. So I had an apartment in Bowden, and Malcolm came to see me. And I said, that's great. I want you to play because we just signed Michael Robinson, centre forward, and I said I want you to play off Michael because he's a young lad and just guide him through. I said, fine. I said, but can I ask you a question? I said, yeah. I said, well, there's two Malcolm Allisons I know. What do you mean? I says, well, the one that Mike Sumby, Colin Bell, Alan Oakes has told me about, and there's one that Dave Watson, Mickey Shannon, and Asa Hartford's told me about because he didn't get on well with the older players. He liked the younger players, bringing them through. And that's why he changed that team from... When I left, we had 10 internationals. When I left to go to New York Cosmos, we had 10 internationals. When I came back, we had a creche.
Yeah, full of young players.
Because Malcolm liked that. So I said, well, and I need to have a relationship. I said, I want to know how competitive I want to be. I want to be ambitious. And I think he appreciated that, because I said, I won't, if you don't want me, not a problem, I won't come. Not a problem.
Yeah, I like the fact that you've interrogated the manager before you've signed. I also like the fact in there, and we'll come to your period in New York in a moment, but you're looking to come back to England. You want to play for City, and you yourself ring Peter Swales, who's the chairman at the time. I mean, would you have ever done that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I would have.
Get on the phone.
Listen, it wouldn't have taken long, my friend.
Get on the phone to a chairman.
Quick trip down south. It's not working out for this.
Of another club.
Mr. Chairman. No, just City.
Yeah.
Just City, yeah. I'd happily come back.
It's an interesting step, though.
You're a mature player. You're not a youngster, and you need to know the facts. It's a big decision for me to make because my wife was pregnant with our first child. Come back to Manchester. I had an offer to go to Derby, Everton. Didn't fancy that at all.
No. And you wanted to be in the Northwest, of course, because you were,
Yeah, and I finished for Man City.
Yeah. Can we talk about the New York period? Because it is fascinating. And I know you had an opportunity to go to Nottingham Forest, and that was just before they went on that double Europe. Yeah, and Manchester United, of course. So you've got two offers. One is to go to Manchester United, which would mean that
it's not a real offer, is it? So.
Your relationship with the fans may have suffered, but at the end of the day, they were on the rise at that point. And then obviously Nottingham Forest, which was the great Nottingham Forest team.
And they won the European Cup.
They won the European Cup, and Brian Clough and everything that went with that. So you've got these two offers, and then you take this New York Cosmos, which is, I'm presuming for you, is more of a life style, and there's a lot more to it than purely football. So do you want to just talk us through kind of that period? And
well, it was just an opportunity for experience. I mean, and I can identify with Trent Alexander-Arnold at the moment because he's 26. He lives in my street, by the way, and he's got an opportunity with Real Madrid and it's a new experience. It's not just a football. You're looking because your footballer's career's 8-10 years max, and you've got experience, and you want to win, but you want to experience different things as well. You went to America, that's what you have to do, and you've got to be prepared to sometimes row against the tide, and for me, it was because I asked for a transfer in November '77, and they put me on the list. And then I got a call from a pal of mine saying, Man United are in for you. Would you talk to them? I said, yeah. So I met Dave Sexton, the manager, and Les Olive, who was the United secretary, at Tony Book's house in Sale, the front room, to talk about that. And I mean, there's a bit of a side story as well, because that evening, Bill Taylor, who was my coach at Man City at the time, we used to play squash together, and there was a pro celebrity squash tournament going on at Carriage's Squash Centre in Droylsden. And him and I were going that evening to watch it. It was John Cleese and Leonard Rossiter against two pros, and it was just
So
the Monday
Leonard Rossiter of Rising Damp.
That's it, Rising Damp fame. So and obviously John Cleese of Monty Python. On the Monday, the physio says, our physio at Man City says, John Cleese has pulled his muscle, his calf muscle. And I know you play squash, would you play? I says, yeah, if the manager says it's an exhibition, it's okay. So I'm down to play in that evening. So in the afternoon, I'm with Dave Sexton and Les Olive talking about going to Man United. As I get to the squash centre, I meet Bill Taylor, and Bill says, how'd it go? I said, yeah, it was okay. What you think? I said, well, I'm just thinking about it. He says, answer me two questions. He says, first of all, are they offering you more money than we are? I said, a little bit. He says, have they got a better team than we have? He said, not at the moment. He says, but Dave Sexton says, I'm replacing Gordon Hill, and they're going to buy Jerry Francis from QPR, because that was his previous club. He says, but, I said, what do you think? I says, yeah, you're right. So I rang United from the reception at the squash club and called the Man United deal off. And then a week or so later, I get another call from a pal who's a pal of Brian Clough's. She says, interested, would you, I says, yeah, I'll talk to him, yeah. But in the meantime, I'd had a contact from New York Cosmos agent, a guy called Ken Adams, who was a London guy who lived in the States, and he did a bit of scouting for them. He said, would you be interested? I said, yeah. You don't turn anything down. You just absorb it and analyse it and see, is it A, B or C, and is it, what's the best for me? And so I had that in the back of my mind. But they didn't need me till February the following year, and this was November of '77. They didn't need me till January, February of '78. So I said, okay, I'll talk to him. So I get a call from, the next night I get a call from Peter Taylor. He says, yeah. He says, answer me two questions, the famous two questions. First of all, would you like to play for Nottingham Forest? And secondly, how much do you want? I said, well, it's great. I said, Brian, but I've just got this thing in the back of my mind about New York. I said, didn't have any children. It's a great lifetime experience. So we'd like to look at that and let me have 24 hours to think about it. He says, yeah, son, no problem. I'll give you a call tomorrow night. No problem. Spot on. Rang me the next night. By this time, it was niggling, in the New York Cosmos. I'd been looking up Pele, just retired, and Beckenbauer and Carlos Alberto, and all the star players, a lot from all. I mean, I had 13 nationalities in my dressing room, a bit like here. So it was just really, it really interested me. And then I said to him, no, I said, I've just got this thing I want to. I says, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I says, but I'd like to give it a shot. So he says, son, great, no problem, good luck. And that was it. So, but on the night of the Man United one, I then went on the squash court and got hammered by Leonard Rossiter.
There's got to be a pub quiz question or something in there, hasn't there?
That's a good one,
John Cleese, Leonard Rossiter, Dennis Tueart.
Yeah, of course.
So the move to New York, you replaced Pele, who had left. You're playing with players like Franz Beckenbauer, Carlos Alberto, and as you said before, they had this really interesting model that was probably almost too ahead of its time in some ways.
Yeah.
It must have been brilliant time for you.
Well, it was new. I mean, the first time we went over there, they flew me over in Concorde. So, and it was in the end of January, beginning of February, when they did the finalise the deal. So we're going the week before JFK had been closed down because of snow. So anyway, we go and fly in Concorde, and as we coming on the runways to the taxiways to come into JFK Kennedy, they'd blown all the snow off the taxiways, and the snow was packed a lot. So you're sitting looking at the snow, and you're walking in Manhattan. All the steam was coming out the grates in Manhattan. Like it's a gangster movie, this isn't it? And it's amazing because we stayed at the St. Regis Hotel in centre Manhattan. And the first night I had myself, my wife, my solicitor, and my accountant, 4 of us. So we just wanted for a bit of fresh air. And I walked on this is, people don't believe me, I'm walking along the street in Manhattan. I've been there 6 hours. A yellow cab pulls up alongside and it says, "Hey, Tueart, you're signing for the Cosmos?"
News travels quick.
Unbelievable.
That's big news, yeah.
My cat must listen, my wife going, unbelievable. But anyway, so that was my first introduction. Then you go down the Warner Building, because the Warner Building is right in Rockefeller Plaza Centre, and we go on the third floor where they have their movie cinema, where they show new movies to get approval or whatever the comments about. So we're in the side room here, myself and my wife, and I've already looked at a video of previous year where they show you the highlights of the previous year. So I thought, I'd like to see who I'm playing with. Giorgio Canaglia, very famous Italian centre forward, scored goals for fun. A young English left winger called Steve Hunt was great over there. And the player who was there last season was Pelé, and he's retired. I went, I'm only replacing Pelé, so it can't be too bad. And it was interesting because as I was introduced, I walked through, it was packed. I thought, blimey. And then there was a guy called Alex Yanis, who was a Yugoslav descendant, but he wrote for the New York Times. And he said, "Dennis," he says, "yeah," she says, "I've spoken to a few of my colleagues in the UK, and he says, you are very, very a good player, but you can be a bit inconsistent." Well, strange enough, on the games I've played,
American journalists hear that. That's funny.
on the games I played in the first half of the season for City, I played about 17 or 18 games. I'd scored 12 goals, 3 hat-tricks. So I stood there, right, fell right into me trap, didn't he? I says, "Yeah, Alex," I says, 17, 18, 19 games, I says, and I've got 12 goals, of which 3 goal hat-tricks. I says, "How inconsistent do you want me to be?"
Good.
So that went down well with the New York press.
Yeah. I think I was looking at some of the games you played there, some of the stadiums you played in, the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, Giant Stadium. I mean, these are amazing, iconic venues. It got me thinking about, because some of those venues were used for the World Cup in '94, which is still my favourite World Cup, and then obviously fast forward to now, and they're going to host the next World Cup.
2026, yeah.
It's been a journey, and obviously you've played there as well, Nathan. I'd be interested to get your thoughts. It's been a real journey for America, where football or soccer...
Where he went, it was a real buzzy area, wasn't it? Real football was real, soccer was real.
100%, yeah. It's interesting because to talk about football in North America, you kind of need to split it into different sections, to be honest, because domestically, their league's in a position which is different to their overall interest in the sport, because you could argue there are probably more people tuning in on an early morning to watch like a Premier League game than there potentially would be in the evening to watch like an MLS game. Yeah. But some of that is because during the MLS season, more often than not, it clashes with NFL, with NBA, with college sport, which is enormous over there. Yeah. But participation and stuff is high. But I just feel that a lot of people from when they're younger, they're not like Dennis, where they think they have to become this. They kind of play football at times as like a social sport. Yeah. Or it's the type of thing where to play it often, you need money. You need to pay to be able to have the facilities to go and do this and go and do that, which kind of goes against the ideas Dennis said, even when he was younger, where if you had a ball, people would just come and play.
It's the opposite, really, isn't it? Yeah.
Not just over here, it's just around the world, basically. Yeah. But I think they'll try and put on a really good show next year, but it's because it's the national team. And America, in any sort of sporting representation as a national team, will give everything. Yeah. But the sport of football itself, this last international break, there was the Nations League semi-finals, and the first one was USA versus Panama, and it was played at SoFi Arena in LA, and the stadium was half full. Yeah. The next game to follow was literally an hour after, and it was Mexico versus Canada, and it was full. Yeah. So there is something to be said about the growth that it has, but it's still not the main sport. But in some ways, I think they're more accepting that it's not going to be that these days.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it was the North American Soccer League when you were there. Obviously, it's MLS now, but the Cosmos are not even a franchise that are still involved, but they're still a brand that people know. And going back to what you were saying before about the way businesses work and all that kind of stuff, they built something in quite a short period of time that still sort of stacks up today.
The problem was is built a big thing, but the foundations were a bit rocky. That's the problem. Yeah. Went too big, too quick. Yeah, and that's a problem because the Cosmos it was probably about another 5 or 6 franchises which could compete with the money, but the rest it was always going to be struggling for them in the NASL, and that was a big problem. So, I mean, I've read so many different books, and the Cosmos were the best and worst thing that happened to the NASL, because everybody was trying to reach the peak that they would, but not everybody could.
Do it, right.
But it was great. We averaged 48,000 people, and I was there.
Which is higher than the average
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot higher than that.
Yeah,
now,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it was new, and at the time, it was I think 42% of the audience were female.
Oh, because of you.
Yeah,
That's cool.
because what you just mentioned before about the cost.
Yeah.
You know, the kids. Whereas if you play, well, you need all the gear. You know, $200-300 worth of gear for to play all these heads and all this. Soccer just in a ball. And also, it encouraged the smaller players to play.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have your 6'97"
yeah.
and 200 £200, you know.
I mean, the women's game is more advanced in the US, isn't it?
Yeah.
Always has been. I used to do a bit of coaching out there. I mean, you've seen me play.
I've seen you play.
You know.
Yeah.
I used to do a bit
real
of coaching out there in the early 2000s, and the girls were so far above, and in terms of quality, than the boys. That was like a general thing.
I think it's different. I think the national team's obviously been way ahead for a long time,
Yeah.
but you'd argue that a lot of other nations are right there now, not least of all with England, for example, and other nations like Spain, you know, countries in the Nordic region and so on. But it's just perceived differently. Like women's football is perceived in a different way to men's football. Because if you're still playing men's football like 15, 16, people class you as being a failed basketballer or a failed American footballer and so on. Whereas in the women's side of things, like, yes, this is what you want to do. And I think financially a lot more are getting to a position to where they can have it as like a significant career.
Yeah.
But then even still, like the NWSL, you know, features one of our own academy products in Esme Morgan. It's doing really well for Washington. Shout out to her. It's good, but there'll be some people who fall out of the sport within a couple of years because financially it's not to the level that it needs to be to call it a career.
So we're expecting a good World Cup there, though.
Yeah, I think any World Cup would be a good World Cup, and I think one thing about America is like they want to put on a show.
Oh, they know how to do that.
Yeah, and I think you'll see as well within the country the makeup of how so many people from around the world are there already, and they'll be prepared to travel to the US. And
I hope I'm one of them. I'm looking to go.
Yeah, it'll be really, really good, I'm sure.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
They can put on a show.
Yeah, that's the
But it's not
show is
putting on a
everything.
show. You've got to have a project, a long-standing project, which is funded and supported in the right way.
Just coming back to City for a second, as someone you were part of the subcommittee that dealt with the move to what is now known as the Etihad Stadium, but at the time was called the City of Manchester Stadium. We're about to invest a lot of money, or we already are investing a lot of money in the new North Stand redevelopment, which is going to increase the city's capacity by 7,000. But actually, the big story is on the outside of the stadium, where there's going to be a hotel, retail space, restaurants, a new museum, etc. As somebody who, you know, you were there from the very genesis of this stadium, and you see kind of how we've made it our own, and we've made changes to the stadium. What do you think when you come here now?
Well, look, I look back to my New York Cosmos days. What they did, the Cosmos Stadium, there was a racing track. It was built 7 miles into Jersey on a swampland. Giant stadium, 75,000, Meadowlands racing track, and then they built a Brendan Byrne Arena, which is an indoor arena. So had 3 sporting structures, indoor arena, racetrack, and a sports centre, because Giants, Jets played there. And then all of a sudden now, if you go and look at the Meadowlands Arena now, it is built up everything now. They've got residential. I think there's a fun park there now. And what they've done, but they needed the major tenant. That's why they had the sport. The sport was the major tenant, and they dragged everything else around it. Yeah. It becomes then not just a football stadium or soccer stadium, it becomes an event destination. Yeah. They're doing the same at Sunderland. They're trying to do the same at Sunderland to build it in, to connect Stadium Light with the city. They're building I just did an interview for Sunderland, the council. They're doing a bridge from the city over the River Wear towards the stadium, and they're developing all below the stadium. So again, that event destination. So I saw that happening in New York, and it's unrecognisable now, because they pulled down Giant Stadium. They built a new one called MetLife Stadium on this virtually the same site, just across the way. Yeah. Pulled the Giant Stadium down. That'll be the car park for the MetLife Stadium now, because that's 80-odd thousand with hospitality. Where the Giant Stadium didn't have the hospitality. There were a couple of lounges, but there weren't the boxes like you need now for to bring in your revenue now. And it's again, I love the phrase event destination, and that's what we're going to have here. It's an event destination. We're going to share the car park, and we're going to share the hospitality, the restaurants, the bars, the hotel. That's a 400-bedroom hotel, I think it is. So we're going to share. So that's going to be a buzzy area. So in essence, that's going to be a real boost. Yeah.
We've got the Co-op Arena here, of course, as well, which is a big thing with all the music that's going on. Our last guest that we had on the podcast was Mateo Kovacic, and he left a question for our next guest. He didn't know who the guest was, but he left a question saying, what was your greatest moment in a City shirt? I think I know what the answer is going to be to this, but that was Mateo Kovacic's question for you.
I'll give you two answers.
Go on, then.
I'll give you two answers. One on the field, and one off the field.
Go.
On the field, 76 League Cup final.
Yeah.
Because it was something for your team, for your club, for your supporters, for that. Because you've got you 8 to 10 years as your career, and you need something to say, I won that, and I won that. You don't just go, well, I won nothing, And then that's the achievement off the field. On the field. When I look at that stadium, and when the first game, which is a test event, we played Barcelona, and I'm stood in the director's box, and I'm seeing Man City and Barcelona walk out alongside each other, and I look around the stadium, and everybody's wearing the new Reebok kit. Well, I did the launch for Reebok of the new kit in the new stadium, in areas where I'd made, because the two things I wanted when I was on the stadium design subcommittee was a good pitch for your players and a good function rooms for off-match day, so it could work off-match day. So I've got areas where I wanted to have good match day, off-match day experiences as well, for events, hospitality. And I did the Reebok launch. I did a couple of conferences there in the Commonwealth Suite.
I remember the Barcelona game. The excitement. There was.
Where were you sitting?
It's what is now known as it's known as the North Stand.
Yeah, I was in South Stand.
Yeah,
I remember looking down, thinking that Ronaldinho played, didn't he?
Yeah.
This is what's going on.
I just there was such an energy.
I can't remember what the score was. What was the score?
I think.
Did it
to be honest, I think we did win.
Yeah.
I think we did.
That's one of two nasty wins against Barcelona. I remember being a part of one as well at the new camp under Marquez. That was a robbery as well.
The Juan Gamper when Richard Dunn.
Had to lift the
Richard Dunn with a trophy. Yeah, incredible.
Great time.
Can you leave our next guest a question? We don't know who the guest is going to be, but we'd like you to leave a question. And if you could, we've had producer Craig. We've had too many that are football related, haven't we? If you could leave something that was more human or social.
Talking to players about something human.
Well, it might not be a player.
Not be a player. It could be. We've had like academy staff. We've basically anyone with a connection to City can be.
I'll ask you, what is the main challenge that you've had to be a success?
That's a good one. Thank you very much. We'll be asking that to our next guest, and then finally, one thing we ask all of our guests is:
I'm not going to pay, have I?
No. What was the last book that you read really quickly, the last film you loved, or the last series that you binged, or something in the arts and culture that you really would recommend?
I'm an avid reader, by the way.
Yeah?
Barca, The Rise and Fall.
Very good book.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. How many books have you read so far this year?
I've read the Cosmos book again.
Yeah.
For once in a lifetime. I just read it in Tenerife last week.
I need to get that, I think. Yeah, I need to read that.
I've read Playing for Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
That's the one about the North American Soccer League when I was playing. I read... Oh, Joe, you got me thinking. I've got a whole 2 bookshelves.
This feels like a feature in itself, doesn't it? Where we go through books that Dennis Tueart's read and we can...
Pat Nevin's a good one. Pat Nevin's a good one.
He's brilliant. I really like Pat Nevin, We're trying to get him involved in something at the moment. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Dennis Tueart, what a pleasure.
No problem.
Manchester City legend. Thank you as well, Nadim.
And also a friend of Nadim Onua.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely is, yeah.
That period, just very quickly, that period, the director period, where we did turn, you guys turned the club around, and it was such an exciting period, and, I'm sure there's a lot of City fans out there who would, like to thank you for your involvement in that, because we were going one way fast, and it wasn't the way we wanted to go.
No, well, but also, I enjoyed being part of it, but I enjoyed seeing it. I enjoyed seeing the smiles on the supporters' face. I enjoyed seeing people being happy in the club once again, not doom and gloom, you know. That's what I enjoyed. That's the main thing that I got. But on the field, the supporters smiling again, celebrating, smiling. Off the field, the supporters smiling, happy again. And that's probably, I'd like to be a bit of a legacy.
It was a great time. Dennis Tueart, thank you very much.
The unbeatable official Manchester City podcast. Watch the full video version of this show via City Plus now.
Got a question? Send us an email at podcast@mancity.com.